Jesus' life, Mark chapter 9. And Kevin ended last week talking about everything involving the transfiguration. Did he take all of his disciples up there with him? Who's his key people that he normally involves in things like that? Who went up there with him? Peter, James, and John. Mark chapter 9, starting in verse 9. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. Now, Jesus has given people orders before, right? Not to say anything. Have they typically listened and followed those orders? When he's done several different healings, what does he say? Don't go tell anybody. But it says right here, he gave these three an order. And it says right here that they kept it. I think I think they had a hard time kind of comprehending what just happened, right? Because it says when they became fully awake, they're like, Peter opens his mouth and is like, let's build a tabernacle for each one of them, a booth for each one of them. And then they're enveloped in a cloud, and God says what? This is my son. Do what? Listen to him. So he told them not to say anything. So, James was killed pretty early on, first apostle killed. I don't know who he told, but I never read anywhere about John saying anything about it in any of his writings, but Peter mentions it. So they held it pretty close. And as they're walking down the mountain, they're still trying to figure out what rising from the dead meant. Had Jesus raised anybody from the dead? At this point, two different people, right? So then they have a question for him, verse 11. And they asked him, why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first? Jesus replied, to be sure, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done to him everything they wished, just as it was written about him. And if you look at Matthew's account in chapter 17, it says they realized that Jesus was talking about who? John the Baptist, exactly right. So we'll continue on in verse 14 of Mark chapter 9. It says, when they came to the other disciples, and that would be Jesus and the three other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. What are you arguing with them about? He asked. A man in the crowd answered, Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of his speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not. And then here's Jesus' reply. O unbelieving generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. So, Jesus has just been transfigured, and what two individuals did he talk to during that time? Elijah and Moses. Did Elijah and Moses deal with stubborn, difficult, unbelieving people? So I think this was kind of like a booster shot, a shot in the arm for Jesus, some encouragement to get to talk to these two individuals. And it says they're talking about his departure. And he just gets another affirmation from God that this is my son, listen to him. So another kind of pat on the back. And as he's coming down this mountain, what does he see? A big group of people, what? Getting along real happy. They're arguing, right? So, when Moses came down from the mountain, did he find something pleasant? So I just wonder what was really going through Jesus' mind. He's just had a pep talk with Elijah and Moses about his departure in Jerusalem, which is his crucifixion, right? He's getting prepared for that, and he comes down, and there's just argument. And what is Jesus' reply to him in verse 19? It's kind of like, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you?" Jesus has dealt with a lot of unbelief in his entire ministry, right? Probably his entire life. Especially where? In his hometown, right? With his own family. And we always talk about, or at least I try to emphasize, all the confusion around him he is talking spiritual kingdom of God, the everlasting kingdom. And people are looking for that physical one. So that's where a lot of the confusion plays in. And every day, don't we have battles that are spiritual? And we try to bring them back to physical. So here he is. He sounds exasperated, right? I think he just had a good experience, maybe getting a pep talk. He gets a boost every now and then from God. This is my son who I'm well pleased. This is my son, listen to him. Now he comes down. There's this argument with his disciples and the Jewish people in power, and he's like, how long do I have to stay here? Any of y'all ever been exasperated like that? Whether it's a job, a personal situation, or something like that, you're just like, I'm ready for it to be over with, how long do I have to put up with this? Verse 20, so they brought, in verse 19, bring the boy to me. So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. And I've always been curious about that. We don't know much about people being possessed other than what we have here in the New Testament and how Jesus dealt with, casting these demons out. But I've always wondered if the demon was trying to kill the kid, where would the demon go after that? I mean, it's like you've got to have a body to be in. But anyway, says he tries to throw him in the water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for him who believes. So, Jesus just said in verse 19, "Oh, you what? Unbelieving generation. And then this kid's father said, if you can do anything. Was that the attitude the lady had that had to meander through the crowd and touch Jesus? She had a belief that if I just touch the hem of his clothing, I'll be what? Healed. Then you had the centurion that's like, what? Don't even come to my house, but just say the word and it will be done. So Jesus has encountered varying degrees of faith, right? In his ministry. Are there still varying degrees of faith today? And I asked one time, I think it's a dangerous question to ask ourselves. What would happen if it happened based on our faith at that point in time? Verse 24, immediately the father exclaimed, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief. So he saw the error in his answer he gave Jesus, and he's like, no, I believe, help me. If I got any unbelief, help me overcome that, right? Yes.
I think it's probably a very accurate answer. I mean, there's sometimes when my faith is high and everything's going great, and there's sometimes when you need help with your doubts, and trouble will come your way, and it's easy to start doubting. Is this really real? I mean, are we following the right thing here? And there's times in life where your faith doesn't just continue to get stronger, but there's setbacks in life with your faith as well. And I think we all need help from time to time in building and bolstering our faith.
And I appreciate that perspective, and I definitely agree with that. Some faith does ebb and flow for different people. I will say that, the last couple years, my dad passed away in 2020 on Thanksgiving Day. And my brother kept his house in Littlefield, so it's still got all my mom and dad's stuff in it. So when we go back to Texas, me and my wife stay in that house, and we're slowly going through all of their things. And in 1992, my youngest brother was killed in a car wreck. And you want to talk about struggling with your faith. My mother had a real hard time with that. He was 19 years old, and he was the baby of the family. And as we're going through the house, I never realized how big a struggle she had with it because she never told us. But I bet there's over 200 books over grief, losing a child, and notes everywhere. And she's got scripture here and there and that. I mean, I knew it drove her into the Bible, trying to figure out why this happened. And she did come out stronger. One of the things that when my mom passed away in 2011, we had some people show up to her funeral that we had no idea who they were. But they made a point to catch me and my brother and say, we lost a kid too, a teenager. And your mom wrote us the most wonderful note about what she went through. So my mom would scour the newspaper. She saw where a teenager was killed or something like that. She tried to find those parents and send encouragement. So, I mean, there's so many stacks of cards from different people that she ministered to through that. But I know her. I told her one time, I said, you're just like Jacob. You're wrestling with God right now because of what happened. So that faith does ebb and flow. And the thing is, when there's that setback, what do, right? Do you let it push you further away? Or do you jump into the Word and get more faith because of it. So I definitely agree with that. So, it brings to mind, I compared three different faiths one time in a sermon. So you had the faith of the widow that Elisha went to stay with. And when he first met her, she had enough faith to say, we're going to make one more meal and die. She had faith enough to die. I mean, how desperate is that? Then you had Gideon. I'll believe if you show me something, right? Oh, you showed it, but I want to see the opposite. Then I'll believe. And then you've got the faith of the centurion, right? So we have lots of different examples of faith here. And what do you do when you read those? Can you relate with all of them at one point in your life? Yes.
We always say the thing about Job. I mean, he had just beyond. And sometimes I think when you go through things, you have to think, is God trying to teach me something? Is there something I'm supposed to learn by whatever's going on in my life?
That's exactly right, because you do get this picture painted in Job about what goes on in the heavenly realm that we really don't know what goes on. So, and Job was another one that my mother studied that book very hard also. So the question is, do we want Jesus to have this answer to our faith, or do we want to amaze him with our faith like the centurion did? Verse 25. When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, this kind can only come out by prayer. So, I've tried to wrap my mind around, I always try to look at different perspectives as we're reading through this. So Jesus' perspective is just transfigured. He's coming down the mountain, had an intimate talk with his 3 disciples, shows up to the rest of his disciples, and there's a big dispute going on. And he calls them an unbelieving generation. It's like, I'm tired. How long am I going to be here with you people? And then you have the Father that says, if you can do something. And Jesus is like, wait a minute. If? He heals the guy because the crowd is coming. Once they get out of there, the disciples are scratching their heads wondering, so he gave them powers to do that, right? To heal, to cast out demons, all these things. And they're like, how come we couldn't do it? Matthew, it says, because of their lack of faith. And Jesus says, this kind can only come out with prayer. So, Jesus has had ups and downs in his ministry. And what we learn from his example is he endured it, right? But he also took his time away from the crowd, right? To have his time with God, to talk to God, to communicate to God. And, any relationship that's successful, do you ignore one another? You put time in to communicate, right? So, I think that alone time, that communication with God, all ties into your faith. Yes, Dennis.
If I had been in those days and one of the apostles, and all of a sudden I got this power, I'm not certain that I would have used it exactly like it was intended.
So you're like,
Knowing my personality, I probably would have got a fairly sizable head because all of a sudden I have this power to do things. I think one of the things that this taught them was, yes, I've given you power even to cast out evil spirits. But remember where the source of that power comes from. The only way you're going to get some of this out is to pray to God. Because that's where the source of the power all comes from. It's not coming from your fingertips. You are the person in between God and what you're dealing with. And don't lose focus on God.
yeah, good point, Dennis. Earlier in Jesus' ministry, what did James and John want to do if they had power? Wipe out some villages? In Acts, Simon the sorcerer, when he saw that the Holy Spirit was given by laying on hands, what did he do? He opened up his wallet, right? So it is about where is the power coming from and why is that power being used, correct? Whose glory? Any questions before we move on? Yes.
Just a comment. You're asking, you're talking about the demon and not looking at what happens.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to the demon if he kills a person? Well, there's lots of people today that seem to do evil things without thinking about the consequences that are going to happen because of what they're doing.
Yeah. So Toby just made a remark that, I'd asked earlier, if the demon kills the boy, what happens to the demon? And Toby said, there's a lot of people today that do evil things without thinking about the consequences. So, yeah.
The last verse there, he says by prayer and fasting.
Okay.
And he had said that people would fast after he was gone.
Yeah. Yeah, he said they're not gonna mourn while the bridegroom's here, right? There'll be plenty of time to do that after he's gone. Verse 30 of Mark chapter 9. They left that place and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. He said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise." But they did not understand what he meant and were afraid to ask him about it. So, what was the reaction we got when Jesus first talked about what was going to happen to him? He's going to go to Jerusalem and they were going to kill him. What did Peter do? He's like, that's not going to happen. What are you talking about? And then Jesus rebuked him by saying what? Get behind me, Satan. You don't have the things of God in mind, but the things of man. So this is another time he's telling his disciples. And Mark made a point to say Jesus was where with his disciples? Alone. He wanted what? 0 distractions? How many distractions do we have in our lives today? Too many to count. It's you talk about how times have changed, and as you're looking through your parents' stuff, my mom saved old phone books. Can you even get a phone book nowadays? I don't know if you can or not, but I mean, she's got them from 1970 on up to when she passed away to 2011. It's
You gotta use something to boost little kids up and
But how much distraction is that thing that you can hold in your hand? So it's the phone book, right? It's the calculator, it's the TV, it's the radio, everything else all in one, right? You know, we like to go camping, and one year we went camping where there was zero coverage. I thought it was awesome, but I thought my daughter was going to die. So how hard, you've got to be intentional, right, to get away from the distractions, correct? How intentional are we, like Jesus is here, to get away, to teach someone, to get away and serve God, to get away and boost our faith by keeping communications open with God? Yes, Kevin.
I think I may have mentioned this before, but there was a study done with college students where they were given the choice of sitting alone in a room for 15 minutes with their phone on the table in front of them, and if they picked it up, they got an electric shock. And over half of them chose to get an electric shock rather than leave their phone for 15 minutes. Yeah, and it's not the phone itself that's the problem. It is our use of it, it's another tool. It's just another tool that's out there. And we, the thing you're saying here, it's all, we have to make the choice. Everything comes down to our choices. Just like those kids chose to pick that phone up and get an electric shock, we can choose to take that time where we leave the phone in another room, and we go and we have time in prayer or time in Bible study or whatever it is. We can sit down as a family to a meal and leave our phones somewhere else. Or we can sit there and everybody sees at a restaurant, there's a family and all four are on their phones there. Might as well be at four different tables.
Yeah, and they're probably texting each other, right, instead of talking. You're exactly right, and that reminds me of a devotional I did one time talking about, be still and know that I am God. I'll make it real short about the devotional, but used to go hunting, bird hunting when I was younger with my dad and his friends, and they used us as the bird dogs because we didn't have bird dogs. So if they shot a bird, we'd have to go get it and bring it back. But I got paired off with my dad's buddy named Jerry, and Jerry, he's like, you got to be still. I was probably 9 or 10, and he gets irritated because I'm squirming. And he's like, I told you to be still. And I said, well, Jerry, these ants sure are sharp. I was standing, squatted down on top of a red ant bed. And I think Jesus likes to keep, or not Jesus, but Satan likes to keep us squirming and busy, right? In innocent things, right? A lot of things that keep us busy aren't bad, right? But it makes it where we can't be still and know that He is God. So time and time again, when Jesus, He needs His downtime, He needs His recharge time, and when He wants a very important point to be driven home. With his disciples, he takes them where they're alone, to where he can have a more intimate setting with zero distractions. And he has this discussion with them. And was it a light bulb moment for the apostles? It says what? They didn't understand, did they? And they were too afraid to what? Ask questions. Anybody in here ever been afraid to ask a question?
I don't understand this. I mean, I know we have got the benefit of hindsight, and that gives us a huge advantage. But, you know, this comes after earlier where Peter, says that Jesus is teaching them plainly. It's plain enough that Peter says it's not going to happen. I'm not going to let it happen to you. But yet here, just a little while later, he's telling them the same thing, and they don't understand, and they're afraid to ask.
So they still had confusion even walking down from the mountain, right? They're having the same struggle that the Jewish leaders are having too, right? What have they been taught their entire life about the Messiah? He's going to be a conquering king, right? And we're going to kick everybody out of Jerusalem, rebuild the temple, and this kingdom's going to last forever. We're looking for King David to come in here and just annihilate everybody. Jesus says, and when we're talking about the Messiah and when we're talking about the Son of Man, same person, right? And Jesus is telling them the Son of Man's going to what? The Jewish leaders are going to do what they want to him. They're going to kill him. After 3 days, he's going to rise. So I don't know if the confusion is what's going to happen after he rises. You know, that would have been my question. If he comes back, does that mean, you know, game's on? We're conquering the world. But they were too afraid to ask. Some of the things they asked Jesus, he's like, "Are you still so dull?" But, you know, I don't know what all he told them while Jesus had these men pulled away for this one-on-one type time. So, but this evidently is something that still confuses them. And they were too afraid to ask the question. All right. We'll jump to Matthew chapter 17. We can get through this pretty quick. Verse 24 through 27. Matthew 17, verse 24. After Jesus and his disciples arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and asked, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" "Yes, he does," he replied. When Peter came into the house, Jesus was the first to speak. "What do you think?" Simon asked. "From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes from? Their own sons or from others?" "From others," Peter said. So they're asking about the temple tax. Who's in the temple? That's God's presence on earth, right? It used to be the tabernacle, then it's the temple. And Jesus is saying, you know, the tax is for God, right? Upkeep of the temple, everything else. Should I have to pay it? It's basically what he's getting to with Peter. You know, do the kings tax their own sons? No, they're exempt. So should I'm the Son of God. Should I have to pay this tax? And I think he's just kind of being a little whimsical maybe here with Peter. Verse 26, from others Peter answered, then the sons are exempt, Jesus said to him. But so that we may not offend them, go to the lake, throw out your line, take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and for yours. So I think Jesus is just trying to drive the point home here with the people in the house that I am the Son of God. Why do I need to pay the temple tax? But so that I don't do what? So that I don't offend these people. Go catch a fish that's got some money in its mouth and go pay mine and yours, and we'll be done with this.
Interesting how God provided the contribution, the tax, to put in his own collection.
That's right. So, anyway, there's a few times that Jesus talks about money. When's the most excited he's been about money? So when he was sitting watching people put money in the collection box, right? And what really excited him? The huge amount of money they're putting in there? One widow lady that had some copper coins, right? And she put it in. And Jesus had to gather his disciples because he's excited because why? She put in everything she had to live on. So who is she putting her faith and trusting in to take care of her? She has no money. God. And he said the other people gave huge sums, but it was out of their what? Their surplus. So then you have money here with the fish to pay the tax. And then later we're going to study about when they come to try and trap him, right? About paying taxes. So anyway, we'll stop there this week. Hope you have a blessed week. Hope it's great. Glad you're here today. Certainly appreciate all the comments. So thank you very much.